We want to start off with a reminder that we are not doctors. Before you make any changes or try something new, always consult with your doctor and medical team first. Chronic illness can vary from patient to patient, so it's always best to consult with your own doctor for what is best for you.
Hello, welcome to I Determined. I'm your host, Mason Harvey, and I have Crohn's disease.
And I'm your host, Michelle Harvey. I'm Mason's mom, and I speak as a caregiver on this podcast. So today's topic is the first of the new year.
Yeah. Happy New Year's, guys.
Yeah.
How's your New Year's going?
Hope everyone had a good New Year's. And this will be episode 1 starting over of season 2.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we're happy to have you guys back. And since school has been on our minds, your favorite thing. Yeah, because it's just around the corner.
After a nice winter's break.
Yeah.
To school. Of course it's going to be on.
I know. It always seems like you count down for so long, and then it's like
hey, the break's here, and then the break's gone, and then there's no breaks after that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh no.
Yeah. So for Mason, when this podcast airs, he will be back in school. Yeah. So we thought, okay, well, what better subject to talk about than school? So in particular, what we're going to be talking about today is homeschool. And I think it's a really appropriate conversation because homeschool is becoming much more popular as time is going on. And for somebody like Mason who has Crohn's disease and other kids out there who
it can be really helpful.
It can be a great tool to have. And I think we're extremely fortunate to have these options available to us and other kids. The thing though is we're not really here to advocate today. This isn't about saying like homeschool is the way to go.
Homeschool is the best.
Or public school is the way to go or private school. That's not what we're here for. Yeah, we're pro school. It's more about what works for your family. Yeah. We advocate for that. So that's the main thing. And for us, homeschool is the thing that worked.
It worked for us. Yeah.
And it's been working for many years. We're not going to be going into IEPs or 504 plans today. That'll be for another episode. And hopefully we can
into all the details.
No, not all of them. No, especially because with homeschool, you can get at our school, you can get an IEP or a 504 plan depending on the setup, which we'll go into later. But for us, it doesn't apply. No. So we will not be discussing that because today is about something a little different. But yes, rest assured, we will get to those IEPs and 504 plans in the future. The other thing I want to mention before we get started is there's no judgment here. We're just offering insight into our story with homeschooling and maybe encouraging or discouraging you from doing this. So we know it's not for everybody. And for us though, no judgment. And this is just something we wanted to share with you guys because it is something that has worked well for us. But we know it doesn't work for everybody.
No, it doesn't work for everyone.
It's kind of like we always say with this, talk to your doctor and find out what's good for you.
For you, specifically for
right?
you.
So let's start with some stats because I think that's important to kind of bring the science end into this. And so according to Brighterly.com, in 2022,
say the number.
Yeah.
4.3 million students in the U.S. were homeschooled, with that number trending up in 2023.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And so that number is growing. And the annual growth rate that they have on it, the actual percentage is 10.1% between 2016 to 2021. And I mean, we can also, all of us remember COVID. And so that is part of the reason for that growth too. The other thing I want to discuss is why are people homeschooling? So why is this trend? Why are people suddenly doing this? Or why are more people doing this?
Why is more people? Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the top reasons. So we looked at the National Center for Education Statistics to find out in their survey why people are homeschooling. And so the largest majority, actually, like the number one reason, 25% of parents listed safe environment as the reason.
Which I think that's a pretty big, that plays a really big role because you want your child to be safe.
Yeah. And
depending on homeschool or public school, there's different safeties and
Mhm.
different safe reasons and stuff for
Yeah.
going to different places. But
Yeah.
um,
And
yeah,
so I think that's very telling though that 25% of the parents homeschooling are doing it for those reasons.
mhm.
So that means it's very important to them. And 14.5% of parents cited bad academic quality choices. And so I guess that, that makes sense too. Depending where you're at, maybe the choices available to you at your schools aren't top notch or aren't what you
Mhm.
consider appropriate for your child. And
Maybe there's something more you can learn that's more on with your grade levels and not a little back.
yeah, because I think in like our case, we were able to advance further than you would have
Mhm.
in a normal
Yeah,
class. And so for you, you were able to accelerate your learning
you're able to go a bit
and
faster.
right.
Which is good.
But for some people, the schools are not rated very highly. There's poor test scores. So 13% want to integrate religion into their curriculum. That is interesting.
Yeah,
And
that
I
is
do
interesting.
know some people who have done that. And I don't know if I knew anyone did that particularly for just that reason, but I think that was a huge influence for them. And here's where we fall into there's the 7.3% that cited special needs as a reason they're homeschooling. But interestingly enough, we did not start as we did not
We
start homeschooling
Yeah, we did not
because
start
of this.
homeschooling because of special needs or things like that.
Right. We already were doing that.
We were just doing it, we were
But now we kind of fall into that
yeah,
group because it's like, wow, this is really now we see how
because with
convenient
Crohn's
it is.
disease and homeschooling is so much
Yeah.
more convenient than going to public school. Now that's just our opinion,
Mhm.
but for us, it was like, "Oh, wow, this really works well," and it all
Yeah.
kinda
It
fit
was
together.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the remaining 14% that didn't list any particular reason. And my guess is because maybe it was a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
And I think that's the case for a lot of people who homeschool. And I think sometimes you have your, what pushes you into doing it. But I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of reasons why you do it. This is in the US. These
Yeah,
numbers
this
are
is the
here.
US of
And
the world.
yeah, and also not all homeschooling is equal. And we know that too. And that can and standards can vary by state. It's interesting for me to hear other homeschoolers in other states what they are required to produce or what their kids are required to do. So it is very different. So homeschooling is not just like a general term. It can vary from state to state, district to district. That's why it's important for you to check out if you're considering this, what your state, what your district requires to see if this is something you can take on. We're going to kind of go now into, why did we homeschool and when
Yeah,
did
what was
we
the
start?
choice?
So, well, actually, when I was pregnant with
Mhm.
Mason, school was a discussion and it would come up quite often because people were like, "Oh, where's he going to go to school?" And we had actually bought our home in a neighborhood that was in the same elementary school district that I went to, and it was within walking distance, which was
Pretty
really
close,
cool.
yeah.
So yeah, we always thought, "Oh my gosh, you can ride bikes to school, we can walk." It was like and so that was really the plan. And then when Mason was around the age of 3, the city started talking about closing down that elementary school. And the reason at the time was because it was underperforming and low test scores. And so that was a little disheartening.
It
So
must have helped.
it wasn't just that, but that was a factor in it. I wasn't super thrilled about that. But the bigger thing was if they did shut down the school, where would Mason
Yeah,
go?
'cause, that we'd have to restart off from, like, a different area,
Where would be driving you to
Yeah,
school in
where
the
would it
morning?
be?
And
Because there weren't really many other schools nearby.
no, so it would definitely be a little bit more of a drive,
Mhm.
and at
Couldn't
the
walk
same
there.
time, also, it's like, what if it didn't happen when you were in kindergarten or 1st grade? What if it happened when you were in 3rd grade, and then you had to go to a different school and you had to leave friends? So it was kinda like, ugh, like, that's kind of, like, up in the air too. So, just for the heck of it, we started looking into other options. Private school, not an option. That was just too expensive, and I really again, some of the schools, around here, we have some great private schools, but just not in our budget at the time. And so we checked into homeschooling. I had a cousin who was homeschooling her girls, and they were so smart, super social, like just these incredible kids. And I always thought, wow, my cousin is doing a great job with her girls. And I didn't really ever consider myself as a teacher type.
Well,
Uh,
now she is.
yeah, which is funny
Yeah.
because how it ended up. But my husband was actually K through 8. That's what he went to college for and got his degree in and was certified in.
Yeah, he
And
works at Costco
he
now.
ended up not going into that
Yeah.
field and stuck with Costco, which has been actually a huge
Yeah.
blessing to us in many ways.
Unexpected
But
but thankful.
yeah, yeah, it all works out, I guess.
Mhm.
I kind of started looking more into it, and I thought, I'm home because I work from home. I run my own business, and I could probably do this. I could work my schedule around his schedule, and thankfully I had a flexible work schedule too where I could do this. And I started really looking into it, and I really liked a couple of the academies in our area. And I thought he's not losing any quality of education here. And I'm not just like winging it. Like for me, I personally, my teaching style, I knew I would need some structure. I would need some
Maybe a
guidance and
little bit
some
more.
help. And so for me, it was like, okay, I want to make sure that the education Mason is getting is equivalent or better than what he
And
could
yeah,
get in a
a
public
public
school.
school.
And so that was kind of my thing. And we ended up actually, the school didn't end up shutting down that was nearby us,
Mhm.
but we had fallen so in love with this idea of homeschool. And even Mason, I mean, you
Uh,
were still little, but
but
you
I still
were,
liked it.
yeah. So it's kind of like, all right, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And if the worst thing happens, it doesn't work out, we just
Just
enroll him
yeah.
into the school down the street. So we just were like, let's give it a go. And when we start telling the other parents about this, there was a lot of positive reinforcement. And then from some family members, there's, of course, going to be some critical comments because there's a lack of understanding of
Mhm.
homeschool. Like, I don't know, they picture us, like I was saying, like we're like in a field, like Little House on the Prairie style, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Counting grains of dirt.
yeah, I'm just counting rocks and stuff. And so I don't know what their vision of it was,
Mhm.
but I was trying to explain that this would be Mason would be getting a very good education. We're making sure of that. And one of the negative comments was that we were told that, well, Mason's going to be way behind other kids his age. He's going to be at least a grade level behind. And looking into it, and this is according to the National Home Education Research Institute, the average homeschooler ranges between 85 to 87% on standardized tests, where public schools are around 50% on standardized tests. So,
Pretty good.
yeah. So, I mean, this isn't to like say one is better than the other, but that to me is a reassuring statistic.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, well, it doesn't look like they're falling behind. And I am very confident in my abilities that I am not the kind of person, Mason knows this. I'm not the kind of person to do things halfway.
No.
And so we are going to make sure he gets a great education. If I can't provide it, I will put him in school where he will get it. I'm not going to sacrifice his
Mhm.
education. So that was one of the things was, kind of like those comments or that he was going to be weird. And I always thought, like, that's such a strange thing to
It's kinda
say.
rude.
It is rude.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's kind of like, well, what's wrong with weird? Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean weird? Different? Like, to me, different is a good thing when it
Mhm.
comes to kids because
Not everyone's the same.
they're
It's
not.
good to be a little different.
There it is. It is. I mean, could you imagine if you had to be just like somebody else and we
Mhm.
forced
You
you
all have to
to
like
be
the
like
exact
that?
same thing. You can't have like your own opinion and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But
It's
yeah.
important to raise kids that do have these different opinions and do have these different personalities. And I think it's important to embrace all types of kids and celebrate what makes them unique. And so if weird is their definition, that and you're not going to be a cookie cutter kid,
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And I also know that in public schools, there are good teachers who also
There are.
recognize this and celebrate this. So I'm not knocking any of you teachers out there. I
Yeah.
think you're doing a great job. I respect it highly. I mean, I'm not a teacher like
You're a
you guys,
teacher. Tell
but
us what it's like to have a class full of hundreds of kids that
yeah,
aren't behaving well, or some of them are behaving, and how you manage that.
and it's a
It
challenge
is. It
for sure,
is.
and they're
Yeah.
doing a great job. And I think it's even better when these teachers do recognize that it's okay to be different and not to call a kid weird or say
Mhm.
it's like
Because you shouldn't do that.
no.
No.
So that was kind of some of the funny comments and also socialization. They're like, how is Mason going to learn social skills? And I'm thinking, you think the only place that a kid will learn
Is
social skills
cool.
is school.
No.
If you're relying on school to raise your kid, that's a problem. I think school adds to that dynamic for sure. But with homeschooling, you can have your child socialize with all
Mhm.
ages. There's all kinds of people, groups and things you can attend, go
I
to.
what I do, I go to the Crohn's and Class Foundations, all that stuff. You get to socialize there. You meet the
Yeah.
great people there, like Ralph Panershka, and
Mhm.
all those cool people, you know?
Yeah, and these, I mean, granted they're older than you,
Yeah, yeah.
but that doesn't matter. Like, I think that's something that you is cool about you is you've had friends your age, but you also get really you get along really well with
Mhm.
adults
Yeah.
too, which is a huge bonus. And I know some kids get shy around adults, and I
It's
think for
it's yeah.
Mason, it's like he's always socialized around both groups. So to him, it's no
It's just
different.
kinda normal for me.
It is, and that's important to
Yeah.
make that a normal. I think that if you sit down, and actually talk to these kids who are homeschooled, you're going to find a lot that are well spoken, outgoing, very confident. So, yeah, school definitely has social advantages, but it's not the only way to do something. And so I think it's just important to look at the bigger picture and realize these kids are going to turn to adults.
Yeah.
And when they're learning to socialize with adults too, they're going to have an advantage that they're going to have that confidence at a younger age. And I think that's a huge bonus.
Yeah.
Mason goes to Classical Academy
Good
High
school.
School.
I think they, always have, like, good classes.
Mhm.
Like, they're not boring, but they're a good mix of facts, but they're interesting at the same time
Educational.
as yeah, educational, you know? So you
Yeah.
don't lose interest.
Yeah.
Because something that I know is, if you're not interested in something, you're gonna have a harder time learning from it.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that subject and you really wanna pay attention to it, you're gonna have a lot easier time paying attention to it. And also, at Classical Academy,
Mhm.
there's a lot of good teachers there, and they're all the ones I've had so far are very kind.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
get assigned an educational specialist, and Mason has been, I mean, I think all the kids are very fortunate with who they get.
Also, one good thing about it is they, take note of my disease.
They do. They all have been very respectful
Mhm.
of it and talk to you about it and make sure you're doing okay. So, yeah, because you meet with them. It's not like like I said, we're not isolated off just in our house.
Yeah.
And there's many different ways to homeschool. And so I was like, just so we're clear again, we're only talking about how we chose to homeschool. There's many ways to do it. So we chose a local academy, which was Classical Academy. We started off in elementary school. We went with them through middle, and now we are at their other campus for high school. And they have many different options. And so you can go to school if you'd like a normal school week with one day at home. You can take a couple courses. They have online classes. For Mason, we've done typically it's been a structured 5 days at home school
The
week.
normal school.
Right. And then every 6 weeks, you meet with your educational specialist. You can, before COVID, we would meet on campus and sit down and go over all of Mason's work
But
and
with
bring a
after COVID.
sample.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with COVID, everything
And
kind of
also
switched
having
to
Crohn's disease,
online.
which, gave me an immunocompromised
Yes.
system, there's a, easier chance of getting sick, especially with an
Yeah.
compromised system, so we use Zoom.
And which is a really cool option. His educational specialist is super flexible about that
You
and
still
makes
get the
herself available
yeah,
too all the time. We can talk
yeah.
to her whenever we have an issue
It's not
or,
like you have to go drive down there in a 30-minute drive.
yeah.
If you need something, you can just Zoom them and be like, "Oh, this wasn't working. How do I fix this?" Or you could just do
Yeah.
something like that, you know?
All the classes are approved through the academy and they all meet state requirements. And so, as I kind of mentioned, we're also required, we have to turn in your samples,
Mhm.
right? You
Yeah.
always know about this. So, we pick out, like, out of the work he's done in a 3 week period, we pick out a sample to send in from every class. And sometimes there's additional requirements, like certain types of essays need to be written on
Yay!
assignments. Yeah, your favorite. He gets
Very
to do so many
necessary.
essays at this age, so many,
It's just
and
fun.
which is great prep for the
Mhm.
future.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
writing podcasts.
Right, actually, it has helped. We were able to use, like, an assignment was we were able to show one was a speech he wrote, he had to give a speech, and so
Yeah.
he was able to write the speech out
And
and
then speak it at the place I was speaking it out at,
yeah,
and that counted for my writing sample.
we wanted them to see what Mason is doing because they also require community service at this school. So I think most high schools
Yeah, I
actually.
think they did.
And so there is those hours. So for Mason, he's able to apply what he's been doing just naturally to give it to
Mhm.
the community service hours. So it's pretty cool. We also have to document their daily work, their hours they put into it, and make sure they're doing all required reading and PE.
If you miss a day, then it all kind of builds up, and then you have to do
Yeah.
more and more every day, and so it's good just to.
And
Get it all done.
because it's a lot of work for
Mhm.
me as
Yeah, because she's a teacher. Well,
yeah, well, like,
there's
you're the
other
teacher, you're
teachers.
the caregiver, you're the parent, you're also working, and so it's like, "Can I do this?" I wanted to make sure I could because, again, he's my priority, and I wanna make sure it's working for him. I'm thrilled for us that it has worked so well. I really am, and, Mason is a year ahead of where he is supposed to be, and I think some people brush that off because when we say he's homeschooled, they probably think, "Oh, the
Yeah.
mom, how cute. She, like, put him a year ahead," and
Yeah.
it's like and so I'm always trying to explain, "No,
No.
no, this wasn't like me just saying, 'Oh, you're doing so good, Mason. Let's just skip a grade.'"
No, you can't do that.
So, he was able to keep up, and we never officially changed the grade because we wanted to make sure that Mason had room to fall back in case it became too much for him.
Yeah.
Because sometimes some of the material, it might be for his age, it might have been
Be a
too
little
difficult.
challenging.
So we made sure before we officially changed it and officially changed the grade, we made sure Mason was comfortable and doing well. So you've earned that you've done all the work.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's probably irritating if people act like, oh,
It's
you know,
homeschool, yeah, it's
yeah, it's just
easy.
homeschool. And
No,
yeah, it's like,
it's public school, but just at home.
right.
It's all the same
And
steps.
I am not giving him a pass. Like
No.
he has to earn it and work for it. And
Yeah, we do get infusion passes.
yeah, but
Yeah.
well, and actually though, that is something that homeschooling we're going to kind of go into has been really convenient for. I mean, we took this seriously. We added on to our home when we knew we were going to be homeschooling. And we were
Good.
like, I mean, it worked out well
Yeah,
too, but
yeah.
we decided on a bedroom and a bathroom onto our home and we would use that as the classroom. And so that ended up being the room that Mason started school in. And because we wanted a room, and my idea was I want him to have a room where when we left the classroom, we shut the door on it
Mhm.
and we had our home. I didn't really want our home and school to blend too much, and maybe that sounds weird to some of you because you're thinking, "Well, isn't that the benefit of homeschooling? You can, like, sit at your
Yeah.
dining room table or on the couch." But I really thought I wanted him to have a place where he knew when he entered this room, it was for learning. It wasn't like the rest of the house. The rest of the house was our home. This was his school. So I kinda wanted that feeling for him so he didn't feel like he was always at school. Like so so that
Oh,
was the
that's all.
idea, and so once he was diagnosed, though, when we came home from the hospital, he was and school had started, he was like, "I don't wanna be in there, I'm not
Because
comfortable."
sometimes, or after the hospital, my back wouldn't feel
Yeah.
quite right, and so sitting in those chairs wouldn't be as comfortable, so you'd have to kinda do it, like, on the couch, which is much easier when your back is kinda like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
or a heat pack, like, if you had a stomach ache and
yeah.
you needed the heat pad,
Mhm.
you
On the
could put
couch,
that
yeah.
yeah, so that was what was kinda cool was we had that flexibility of not having him, like he had to stay home from school. If he was in a public school, he'd have to stay home, and so we kind of had these options where we could just sit down on the couch,
Mhm.
and we could and it was no different to me, so we slowly left that room. We ended up just doing what worked
Mhm.
for Mason. That kind of leads us into our next topic, which is why it does work for us, and especially if you do have Crohn's disease, but we also recognizing that it might
Might
not
not work for you.
work for you.
'Cause, like, kinda like Crohn's, school is different for everyone.
Depending on your level, some people have Crohn's and they can operate at a normal level. They don't have the same severity. Some people don't receive as many treatments like you do, and they're in just once every 8 weeks versus us every 2 weeks.
And
We're in
sometimes people might actually get infusions or shots or those kinds of things more often.
Yeah, and you might have a suppressed immune
Immune system,
system.
yeah.
So the thing was when Mason was diagnosed, I guess the most important aspect was if that Mason was thriving. We
Mhm.
wanted to make sure he had the best start he could
And I was enjoying it.
and he was in yeah, that he was enjoying it because it's like if he was miserable and I
If we're
didn't
doing homeschool and I wasn't happy, there wouldn't really be, like, a reason,
right. That was what was
Mhm,
important, and so that was already happening, and then when he was diagnosed, it's like we wanted to continue with that because he
mhm,
was happy with it, and so every year, Mason's input was always number 1
mhm.
and making sure that he was enjoying school. I mean, and enjoying school. You still
Yeah.
complained. Like,
Obviously,
yeah, I want to
school
let you
isn't
know out
the
there.
best,
Yeah,
but
they're still gonna complain.
yeah,
Okay,
but
so
obviously being homeschooled, I mean, not having to walk to school every day
yeah,
or riding a bike to school every day is a
yeah.
little better than,
I point that out on rainy days or
yeah.
really hot
Yeah,
days.
you don't have
I'm
to
like,
bike in the rain or walk through the rain, so staying at
yeah,
home with school during those kinds of days is obviously a little
yeah.
better,
So
and
it's not to say like
yeah.
with homeschool you're gonna have like
Oh,
this
I love school.
magic where
Math
your
is
kid is like, I
wonderful. I know how to
love
solve
it.
everything.
Because it's still challenging. I
Mhm.
mean, they're gonna still I think you
Yeah.
enjoyed it though more than going to public school, where some kids would be the opposite. So for Mason though, it was working. I think there's a push sometimes from different institutions and different places. There's still a belief that homeschooling is not on par with public schools. And they have their different reasons for it, and I respect those
Mhm.
too. But I think it's important for these places to look at the child and see like, are we trying to fit them into a mold that doesn't make sense? Because at the time I was thinking he's going to miss so much school. If I was to enroll him,
Yeah.
he would be spending more time at appointments because when you got out of the hospital, you were sometimes like 2 times a week at an
Yeah.
appointment and also
Or
not
also
feeling
almost like
well.
3 times a week sometimes.
It yeah, it really was. It
Mhm.
was really crazy, and we didn't
It
know
would have been almost impossible.
it would have. It would have really made it harder on you because you would have been missing instruction
Mhm.
in the class. Maybe you get makeup work, but you would have missed the instruction by the teacher. It would have been a lot. And so we had a great system in place. And, here we are 3.5 years later,
We're
and
still doing the same thing.
yeah, and Mason is excelling and he'll be graduating early and everything. So that's pretty exciting. And I know sometimes with chronic illness and things like Crohn's disease, sometimes these kids do end up a little behind because they do have so many more challenges than other kids do. So for us, so like we did the math and just for treatments, these are just for Mason's biologic treatments,
Yeah.
you would have missed 84
That's
school
crazy.
days. Yeah, which is a lot on
So yeah.
you to like have to make that up in a regular classroom. And then kids are seeing you're gone all the time. And that doesn't include like other appointments. If we threw in the other appointments, so that's just at the bare minimum 84
Mhm.
days. With the other appointments he has with procedures, being in a flare,
Yeah.
it would have been the hundreds. And so, you
Would have
almost
been
have like an
chaotic.
entire school year that he would have
Just missed. Yeah.
missed. And so for me, homeschooling made it possible for him to shift some of these classes when onto the weekend.
Mhm. And I still
And
get the instructions and I'd be able to understand them still.
right, you
And
don't
not
feel
like,
like with
What's
math.
this?
Could you
What's
imagine
go"
with
Yeah.
math, like if you're missing a step and then you're
Yeah, if
trying to
you
go
don't really
on?
know what you're trying to do,
Mhm.
because like, trying to solve something without knowing what you're doing or instructions, it's like, oh, you
It's
can't really do it.
It's tough, and we highly admire all of you guys out there, all you kids listening if you
Mhm.
are,
Yeah.
and you are pushing through,
You're doing great.
you are doing
Yeah.
great, and you have challenges other kids don't, and it's
Mhm.
gonna make you a stronger person, and it just sometimes just doesn't seem fair though that you have to go through
Yeah.
this, but,
You're still
know,
going through it
you're
and
getting through it.
you're doing your best.
Yeah,
We
and
can only try, and that's
that's
good.
all right. It's all you can
Yeah.
do. And so for us though, we had this option that I'm like, well, this is cool. If he doesn't feel well,
Mhm.
we can just put him on the couch and let him do his studies. And so it was a really easy adjustment. And it also reduced anxiety and
Mhm.
stress for you. And I think also being immunosuppressed would have been stressful being
Going
at
to school
school.
and you hear someone coughing, like, "Oh, no, what's that?"
Yeah, because then if
Where'd
you
that
get
come from?
sick, then
Yeah,
you're gonna miss
then
more
you skip more
school, and
days.
then you might miss treatments, which will lead
Yeah,
to so
even worse.
so for some kids and again, all these kids are on different treatments, and so
Mhm.
it's hard to say, that's why it's important to look at your individual
Some kids might
situation.
not be immunocompromised, some
Right,
may
they may
be.
not be to your
Yeah,
extent or as severe as you.
yeah.
So the thing is, for us, reducing that anxiety and stress is something that was very healing for him, and
Mhm.
we've discussed stress in our one of our last podcasts and how it relates to IBD.
If I had to go to school every day
Mhm.
and I was stressed, that would, cause
Could
potential
potentially
flares or
right.
things like that.
Because, I mean, it's like how
And
when you're in a flare
also when you're stressed and you're in school, it's hard to learn sometimes
yeah,
because you're
that's a good
thinking about
point.
all these other things, and you still have to try to solve all these questions or remember things, the dates and all that stuff.
Right,
So with stress, it's hard to learn, but then it could cause other
right.
issues that could, potentially mess up an entire school week instead of just
Right, because
But
for some kids, it can be embarrassing
mhm,
situations that are very difficult for kids, and, sometimes you're gonna be up running to the bathroom several times and may miss a lot during a class. So, there's a lot of things for these kids as far as anxiety and stress go with this. All the kids are different, but for Mason,
it
it was,
works.
like, game
Yeah,
changer for him,
and
and
it
it
changed
really
the way I
helps.
learned.
It does,
Mhm,
and I think you're more relaxed, like you
mhm,
said, when you're stressed, you kinda shut down, probably you're not learning to your full potential.
yeah,
And so this way you can. One of the things we said in the very beginning that we're not here as advocates for homeschool.
mhm,
We're advocates for what is best for your child and what you can do for them because
yeah,
sometimes what is best is not something you can afford, not something you can
mhm,
make happen, but you just need to do the best you can with your situation to give them the best advantage. And so that's why we're pro school in all aspects of whatever works. And so one of the good examples though of why homeschool,
became so popular.
it did becomes was COVID.
COVID. Oh,
Yeah,
and,
and
so many kids were homeschooled during
yep,
COVID,
yeah.
and some didn't like it, some did like it, some
And to be
preferred to school.
fair, it wasn't like your homeschool, like, they were
No,
thrown into situations where, you'd
like,
either
it
they were
wasn't even
suddenly
the
thrown in
same.
front of a computer,
Mhm,
and they had to these parents were working, they were busy, they didn't know how to teach some of this stuff, and so these kids had to rely on different learning methods that they were not used to, they were suddenly thrown into this, it's no wonder a lot of them struggled,
some
so
of their grades went down, which isn't
yeah.
great.
No. And so, like, for Mason, our type of homeschool was already more structured. We had a
Mhm,
system. And for a lot of these kids thrown into it during COVID, you have these parents that are well meaning, but they're not cut out to be teachers to their
mhm,
children. Maybe teachers for other kids,
yeah.
but it is a tough job. And parents know sometimes your kids aren't going to respect you the same, or it's going to be hard for you to teach them because they're your child. And so that's an important dynamic to realize if it works for you. COVID did show it did not work
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah,
And these
yeah,
parents were trying to work from home while they're trying to teach. I mean, there were some really funny videos that went viral that came out of
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So there's like a lot of situations where I felt for these parents because I was used to being working from home
mhm.
already and running a business and
For
being
us, it was just
flexible.
our normal
It
that was
really
just
was.
continuing.
It really was. The
Yeah, it wasn't
abnormal
really
thing was the
different. Yeah,
diagnosis of a disease. That was crazy.
and the other
But
abnormal thing was the introduction of COVID to the world,
right, which people were stressed about that too at the time.
Mhm.
They didn't know a lot about it.
They're stressed
So,
again.
yeah, so I think that COVID is just kind of a perfect example of why both public school and homeschool work because it just depends on the child and the parent. And this is why some grades and some kids are behind, they fell way behind and scores went down for schools. Other parents kept homeschooling because their children started doing better. I think
They
parents
like
started
homeschooling,
realizing,
huh?
like, wow, our kids do learn differently. My
Mhm.
kid does like homeschooling. So I think it's COVID was very revealing for different types of teaching and how kids responded, I think. It was kind of an, accidental test
Yeah,
of that whole
an
system.
accidental test created by COVID.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of you may have already kind of if you already went through that, you may already know, like, homeschooling is not an
Do you like
option.
homeschooling? Do you not like homeschooling? Do you
Yeah.
absolutely hate it? Do you like public school? Do you not like public school? Any of that.
Yeah, and there's some of you out there that are full-time working parents
Mhm.
that are not at home, and this is just not something that's gonna work for you. And there's some of your stay-at-home parents that have other kids, and teaching multiple children does not appeal to you. And there's some of you that really wish you could homeschool your child who has Crohn's disease and make it easier for them. And then there's some kids that have Crohn's disease and don't want to be homeschooled. They want to stay
Mhm.
in school. So there's so many different dynamics. And I just think it's important to, as a caregiver, also as the adult, know yourself very well as a
Mhm.
caregiver, a parent, a teacher, a working parent, all these things and know if
Employee.
you're capable.
Try to think like what is your limit? What you can do without stressing or worrying about something. What
Maybe self
Yeah,
motivation
self
too.
motivation. That's a good one. Yeah.
Because I think some kids, like, in a classroom, they like that competition. Like,
Because
I know
they wanna feel motivated to get like first place in the classroom, maybe.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I feel like
grades.
maybe in homeschool, for me at least, um, I don't really like the stress of competing. but
Yeah, you're
I know
not like
other
that.
kids do
Yeah.
like that.
I didn't like competing against other kids. I like competing against myself.
Yeah, competing against
So
yourself.
I
Try to get
did.
better and better and
I
better. Yeah.
did. So yeah, so there's something to that. I did. I would always try to do better. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, if I yeah, so I was very competitive with myself. But
That
like my
competitiveness
husband has
helps
mentioned that like it helped him in school to do better to see other kids doing well. And so that would encourage him to
to
want to
try
do
to do
better.
better,
And so it again, like just between the three of us, there's all different ways that we were encouraged and
to get better and learn.
right.
Mhm.
And for me, like, and this is like controversial too. I know testing is a big thing. Some people are pro testing, some other parents think testing does not measure anything. And I'm kind of somewhere in there where I think in a classroom,
As a kid, I don't think testing should exist.
I was gonna
They should just
say,
throw it out the window. We
we'll
don't
hold
need
your
testing.
opinion. We'll hold your opinion. Um,
I know.
but I think that in a classroom, it's one of the only ways though a teacher can see how
Mhm.
kids are doing
If
because
they
if you have
remember,
30 students,
yeah.
how are you it's like, okay, well, how do you know that the student over here, how they're really doing? So tests can help you see that. Now, for you, one
Mhm.
of the advantages with homeschooling, I can see immediately when we're working on something where you're struggling. And if you are like, I can't figure out this math problem, it's not like I have to wait to test you to
Mhm.
figure out, oh, you had a problem with it.
Yeah.
I can see you're having a problem
We
with
can
it
go back to
and we
that
can
lesson and
identify it.
figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's different advantages with that. So for us, I don't feel like testing is I mean, we do it.
Mhm.
We do tests. They
Like, it
are part of
helps, but
it.
it's not
But I
that
don't think it's always an
necessary.
indicator of intelligence or
Mhm.
attention because I think some kids are really good at memorizing stuff for tests, but then
Then
they forget it the next
others, yeah,
day. So to me, what's more important is that Mason is retaining this and really learning the
and
concepts.
understanding it.
And so, yeah, so, I think some kids love to be told they got an A. And I think other kids don't care if they got an A
Mhm.
or not. They just care more about if they got the concept and they know what they're
Mhm.
doing. So, that's kind of another cool benefit of homeschool. You can kind of do it however you want. The other thing is, I think the misunderstanding is that homeschooling is sometimes lazy or when I think it's quite the opposite. It is a lot of work.
Mhm.
It's a lot of dedication. And we're not teaching the same grade over and
No.
over and over. Every
It's
year, the grade
yeah,
changes.
1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th
Yeah,
grade,
well,
5th
hopefully it
grade.
changes.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Maybe 10th grade will be exactly like 9th grade.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
But it's something that it's true, like, you're on to the next subject and so am I. So,
Mhm.
as an educator, I'm not teaching the exact same thing, and so it's not like you have a chance to really get good at it and really hone your skills. So you just you have to be really good at remembering, kind of like learning, and it's, so it's tough. It's
It
not
is.
easy. It's not for everybody, and I get that. And also trying to navigate chronic illness at the same time isn't easy either, but I think homeschool kind of prepared us
Mhm.
because I already knew I had to be flexible with work
Yeah.
and with so it's like, okay, we can do this. I'm happy that you're doing
Yeah.
so well and
And I'm understanding everything and it works for me and we didn't
mhm.
really have to change anything since it's how we started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I
We're just
think
kind of
yeah.
continuing on from the
Right.
beginning.
Right, and I mean, there is the options too, if he always has the option,
Mhm.
if he wants to do something different. Luckily, our school is pretty flexible with that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool
But
that
I
we
mean,
do have
I
that.
don't think so.
Yeah, you're this is I think
Yeah.
just like some other like, some kids listening are not gonna relate with you, other ones are gonna totally relate.
Right. Then some will be like in the middle, maybe.
Yeah, so that's kinda like, don't put your child in a box, and, I mean, if you have multiple kids, you already know how different all your kids are. They're not all the exact
Mhm.
same, and so it's like you already know that varies, so why would there just be one teaching style that should work for all of them? I mean, it really makes sense to me that there's multiple teaching styles, but unfortunately, teachers don't have that luxury. When you have a class with a certain amount of kids, you have to keep the order and you have to
Mhm.
have lessons planned. You can't plan to each student. You just
Yeah.
can't. It
You can't be
doesn't
like,
make
well, this
sense.
kid over here needs about an hour to learn. This kid over here needs 15 minutes.
Yeah,
This person here likes this subject. This
it's
one likes this subject. Well, we're going to have them all do the different subject, but in the same time, you can't do that.
it's really challenging.
So it is
So
tough for the teachers too.
I think that homeschool is a great option for your kids in that sense. And I think that's just important to focus on what helps your child excel. And that is the beauty of all the different options we have. does any child love school, but do they love how they're being taught, I
Yeah.
guess is a better.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
So it's like finding out, okay. And then, as the caregiver and as the educator, it's like, are you successful at it? Because,
She is.
well, thank you. But if it was not something that's working well for me, it would not be worth it for me to put Mason through that.
Because if I'm
We'd have
not
to have a
learning
discussion about,
anything, there's
going back to school because it's like, if this is not working and I'm not feeling like I'm good at this, I'm not going to sacrifice his education again due to my lack of knowledge of certain things or expertise. So it's important to be humble and to be honest with yourself if you are successful at something and to really examine that. And medical necessity, sometimes you are going to have to teach them at home because there's durations of time where they will be home. And I know the school districts do have something in place where they can send an educator to your house to help
yeah.
if it's like for
Like if you
a
have an
long time.
infusion, there are those things where you can have the infusions come to your house, and you have the infusion at your house. Then you can have a teacher come over, maybe
Yeah.
teach
So
you.
there
Yeah.
are other options, but for us, we knew this was very long term. We weren't looking at just a year or 2 years. We wanted something that would be in place and be stable and a structure for Mason that was there for him, regardless of where his health went. And so for us, homeschool fit the
Perfectly.
bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did that. And so I think in wrapping this up, I think it's important to say that I would never tell someone, "Oh, you can for sure homeschool. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it." I don't like those kind of statements because I think we're also individual
Everyone
and
is different.
they
There are
are.
different
Just like you
preferences.
wouldn't tell another kid, like, you can
Yeah.
definitely do homeschool. Why
Homeschool's the
would
best.
you
You should
like
do
it?
it.
Because other
Yeah.
kids might be like, why do you like
Yeah.
homeschool? That's not
Why don't
my
you like public
thing.
school? You could do public school.
Yeah, so it's like I don't wanna sit here and say I think you can definitely do it, but I
Mhm.
do think that if you want to give it a try or if you are doing this out of medical necessity, just do the best you can, and
Just try. Because you don't know if you don't try.
for you out there, if you're thinking of it, you're considering it, I would say go for it,
Mhm.
and if your kids are on board,
Yeah.
great, and then
Even better.
if you try and it's like nobody's happy or it's not working for one or the other, then you just go
Okay, let's
back.
go to public school.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
no big deal. So, I will say for us, yeah, it's been a great, great ride having this homeschool, and
I'm
I'm
really thankful for it.
yeah, I really am thankful for it because it's allowed Mason to really grow into who he is and has allowed him to also he's gonna have different potential out there. He'll have fulfilled all the requirements that the state requires.
Mhm.
So that's very important. So we're really proud of him.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge accomplishment, but we've given him the tools that he needs so he can get the education he deserves and not let a disease hold him back.
Yeah.
So that's
Live my
important.
life.
Yeah, so that's about it. That's
Yeah.
our spiel on homeschooling.
Wonderful skill
So,
on homeschool.
yeah, so I hope it was helpful in
Yeah.
some ways or insightful. And maybe some of you listening are like, I'm glad they said this because I definitely don't want to do it now. And you helped me. And maybe,
Or maybe you're listening to it and you're like, oh yeah, it sounds good to me. I want to do it now.
yeah, and maybe some of you out there
Or
are
maybe
homeschooled, were homeschooled, and you
yeah.
can relate to Mason, to me.
Or you're saying, oh
And
yes, public school does sound good.
yeah, and maybe like it really does. So,
Go in any direction with this.
yeah. So anyways, you guys are welcome to follow us on Instagram at Team IB Determined. We would love to have you guys follow along our journey and watch you get to watch all the fun we have, which we try.
Follow our journey.
Yeah, and we get to watch Mason's medical journey too on there and get to see all of that. It's where we include everything. So give us a follow on there. And you can also listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts. And I put that link to Buzzsprout all the time in the comments so you guys can find any station that works for you to listen to us.
And if you like watching, go to YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to be notified every time we post a video, make sure to hit that bell. And also, we have been getting comments. So
Yes.
thank you for sending comments.
Yeah.
But
Keep
we
them
do like
coming.
more. Yeah. Send more comments. We'll read them all.
Coming and keep
Yeah.
suggestions. Anything you're like,
Ideas
hey,
for future videos.
yeah,
If you're related to anything in the video. Yeah. I don't know, things like that.
we would
If you
love
just
to
want to
hear
say
it.
hi or how you found us on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Like someone today had shared with me, and it was like, "Oh, this is cool. I have to read it to you
Very
because I don't
cool.
think I got a chance to show you yet."
Well, if
So,
you comment to us,
yeah.
we're gonna read it.
Yeah, so it's kinda cool. So that was exciting. So that was right before we started filming this, but I'll be able to show it to you.
Yeah.
So those are cool. So thank you guys for continuing to listen
And
and
support.
especially into the new year. So we'll still continue on with guests and new topics and maybe revisiting old topics too that we have new insight into, or if somebody wants something talked more in depth on, we're happy to do it. So
Here's an idea for a comment for the New Year's. What is your New Year's resolution?
yeah, I don't have one.
Yeah, I don't either.
I know, but we'd love to hear if you have
Yeah,
one.
we'd love to hear that.
Yeah, that would be
Hopefully it'll
great.
happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
that would be
yeah,
wonderful. So share yours, please.
yes.
Maybe, yeah, we would love to hear it.
Love to
It'd
hear
be
it.
inspiring.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening and make it a great year. And please
Yeah.
keep listening.
Great New Year.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. We will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. We hope you will stick around, tune in, and reach out to us with your own journeys. We are excited to give you an inside view of what it takes to be a caregiver and what it's like to be a patient.
And most of all, we hope you'll maybe be able to play something you hear on here that might help you in your own life. Sometimes life changes, and it's all about how you handle the journey.